Hey, hello everybody. Welcome to the Zoom Test Kitchen. Happy New Year for all of us, almost New Year for all of us in the US. There, I don't know, we might even have some folks already living in 2022, but there's definitely a variety of time zones. I'm Jeff Widgren. Good to have you. Especially good to have our guests here, Sam Kokajko, Andy Carluccio, looking at the list. Yep, he made it there. And well, so glad that you come out and enjoy some time together, talking about Zoom and today's focus in particular is the acquisition that Zoom had of pieces and parts of, I guess, Liminal Technologies and primarily ZoomISO and two co-founders, Jonathan and Andy, as well. So, Sam, how are you? Let's say hi to you first.
Doing good.
Good, good. Glad you could make it out here. Andy, you there?
Good to see you. Thanks so
Good.
much for having us.
Yeah, absolutely. Glad to have you guys here, and Jonathan as well. Looking good. Very good. So, is this the end of your guys' first week at Zoom? Please, is that? It's a guess on my part of when your start date was.
Yes, we are officially over on the Zoom side, but all of HR is out this week, so our onboarding is a little staggered. So
That was going to be my next question, was the
right.
onboarding.
It's. I will say there's something nice about being able to join in the midst of a holiday period, so it's a little bit of a slower start versus everything jumping at you right at once. So that I've actually enjoyed a little bit of being able to actually take the holiday a little bit more. So that's been good.
Absolutely. Well, still, familiar faces that we've gotten to know over this last year, and appreciated that you've developed, guys, and makes all the difference in the world for us and so many. So today we are going to, not that we don't use it any other time, but we're going to depend primarily on the chat for questions. Sam, Andy, Jonathan, whether it's clarifying questions, what's in the future questions, could be personal questions, what they're doing for their New Year's Eve tonight, for all that goes. We like to be relaxed here in the Zoom Test Kitchen, especially today, with it being a New Year's Eve as it is, and really celebrating all the accomplishments and things we've learned along the way this year, and so forth. So it should be a good time. Well, very good. Let's see.
Jeff, I don't know that you have record.
No, in the Zoom, it's a good reminder. Thank you.
Sorry.
I've got it recording. No, it's good. I've got it recording on vMix, and it's streaming to YouTube and Facebook. Let me hit record here. We'll get a cloud version as well, just in backups. But anyways, it's a good time. I'm looking. Guy Cochran, you're here. Thank you very much.
Hello.
You guys gonna monitor that chat and kind of pull out the questions and so forth. But one of those first questions that I have is maybe for Sam. Describe the dynamics. Let me go even before that. What was your relationship, dependency, awareness of ZoomOSC and ISO prior to?
So I mean, I've been working for. I don't actually know how long it's been date-wise. I've been involved in it for quite a while now, not as long as Andy and Jonathan, obviously, but it had been something that I and a couple others had kind of tossed up the chain to, and then we don't hear about it for a little bit until at one point I got drugged back in by Nick, and about this. well, yeah, I know a lot about it. It's what me and my team are doing constantly. And it's where I to work on it on a daily basis throughout the last several months here of negotiations, and I guess less negotiations and more planning and trying to make sure that we would have a successful switch over, that we would have, like, how are we going to message it? How are we going to manage our customers on both sides as we go? How are we going to make sure that everyone has these protected workflows, that we're not leaving anyone high and dry, that, like, truly making sure that everyone who touches the deal at all understands what we're dealing with here and how important it is that it remains reliable at every step along the path. And that's something that I've been really defending. I say defending it. It hasn't been met with much. It hasn't been met with a fight. Andy, Jonathan, and myself been some of the prime voices to be heard to bring time that there is something that could cause an issue, that we're able to be there and say, no, but we actually need to look at it because, you know, we know that someone's going to need to use this, or we know that people are going to be curious about how this works. We need to get out in front of the groups like we are today, to really be that candid and transparent company that that Zoom has been, and now that we are together. You know, I think you've seen as much transparency out of our orgs as we can possibly afford to give, and we are excited to continue that going forward.
Yeah, I gotta say it had to have been a hard secret to hold for quite a while, which, you know.
Yeah,
But
it definitely got ugly towards the end with me having to go to my team and be like, all right, there's something I can't tell you about, but it's gonna be really important.
yeah,
Oh, we're dealing with this. Just wait a couple of weeks. It'll be better. But yeah, in the meantime, you know, kind of your original question there was like, you know, what was our sort of, what was the knowledge of it going back before the acquisition, and that, you know, we've definitely been very aware of them, been interacting with them a lot on projects. Me and my team have been using this software on an ongoing basis. So, you know, you guys understand just how open Andy and Jonathan were to that community and how available they made themselves to that community, and just know that we were taking advantage of that as well.
yeah, absolutely. As a customer provider relationship at times, right? And I guess what's neat to know is you didn't just see a company with, you know, some feature sets, if you will, and go, oh, that's great, we should, you know, consider. Realize that those tools help you and what your team is actually producing out there as well, which is good stuff. So
I think one of the things to kind of look at there is, if you look at what our Zoom Apps Fund is doing right now, you know, we have a lot of money that's developers for Zoom Apps. That's not the direction chosen for ZoomOSC and for Liminal. The direction shown for them was a much tighter integration that we're able to acquire, or that we're able to deal with this acquisition, with bringing Andy and Jonathan on board to work directly with us within the inside. And I think I would encourage you guys to read into that choice that was specifically made, and why we may have gone about that.
Yeah. Well, now I know when I texted Andy and I said, hey, did you win any of that money? He said, nope. I'm like, now I know why. So that's all cool.
And I'd be lying if I said that wasn't consideration at point. Was, you know, what's the best decision for the Liminal users and for the products? You know, one of the concerns that I had early on, you know, giving the hug of death to ZoomOSC, ZoomISO, bringing them in to a restricted infrastructure. And I think that we've made the decision that this is going to be the best, all things considered, and that this is going to be the biggest thing that can have the best impact on our future and our customers.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely great choice for sure. Great selection. Couldn't get to better guys who've, you know, represented a new product just so incredibly well and been so present, if you will, you know, to the industry, developing for the industry, and you know, doing what the industry does. That was always one of our biggest compliments is is, you know, delivering and producing, events and productions themselves, and it made their product and their solution so incredibly relevant to what we were looking for. Myself and I'm sure many others here in the group today spent many of hours on Zoom calls. Andy, I was right here at this desk at, I don't know, 2:30, almost 3 o'clock in the morning with Andy and Ed Willock and others, and just, literally developing on the fly. And that one night, I've said it before, is, I could just hear the shout of joy from his mouth when he kind of conquered this speed refresh for multi-spotlighting and so forth. It's just really, really cool to be a part of this process for sure. Andy, I don't want to overlook Zoom Test Kitchen today. I'm assuming they're some that have maybe not heard of ZoomOSC and ISO, or have heard of it but haven't used it yet. But one, could you or Jonathan explain, what is it? What are the now that you have, I'm going to say, I'll just do a year. I know you started earlier than that, but now that you have a year snapshot, what's the top 5 features that users end up using, and then real exceptional, high use cases as well, so that everybody has a pretty good understanding of, if nothing else, what they're missing in ZoomOSC or ZoomISO.
Absolutely. So I'll give a perspective, like what the company, from the product perspective, and then I think I'll toss it to Jonathan to talk about from the services perspective how that integrates with workflow. Might be a good illustrative point for how things are done. But let's talk about the apps first. So ZoomOSC and ZoomISO are designed to be tools that producers use while an event is in progress to help manage and produce that event. And again, when we look at it in the context of this merger, you can see now that Zoom has a total value chain from the pre-event, where Zoom Events is able to allow you to build out your event, build some itinerary, things like that. And then it had, through the APIs, you could get, post-event analytics information after your event. But what Liminal focused on was that in-event period. What are the things that we can do while a meeting or webinar is in progress to allow you to better manage the things that are happening in it? So the most popular one by far is the ability to manage pins and spotlights, right? Take a Stream Deck and have all the names of the different participants on the different keys and be able to hit them, spotlight them. Now everybody in that meeting see them, hit them again, and send them back. And now we're looking at a gallery viewer, for example, or something like that. So the ability to tie Zoom to external systems is really the main precedent. Liminal's focus was with our SDK-based applications, ZoomOSC and ZoomISO. So with ZoomOSC, the focus is on control, and you pair really well with events that were produced inside of Zoom, right? So like we are today, actually, where we have participants gathering here, the conversation's happening here in Zoom, and we want tools to be able to better manage that. So ZoomOSC was a window into remote controlling all sorts of features that you would do as a host or a co-host in a Zoom meeting, muting, video on off, pins, spotlights, switching between gallery view and speaker view, being able to tie all that out to buttons or media servers or vMix or other systems like that, to synergy and really include Zoom in a production workflow. With ZoomISO, what we did is we took it a step further and we said, okay, we're going to give you all the same things that we did with ZoomOSC, but now we're going to also give you the ability to individually export participants' video at HD through protocols like NDI, SDI, and Siphon. So the purpose of that was to basically break a Zoom call down into its constituent parts so that you could then put it back together the way you wanted it, be that with a branded experience, customized views, whatever that was. Raw data and raw video was sort of the key to being able to put that back together to work in native workflows, as though all the cameras that you had in a Zoom call were located in your studio and you could just plug them into your hardware and mix in the way that you had pandemic when this was so prevalent. So the goal of the applications was basically to be able to be a window into the Zoom platform to help you in the in-event, in-webinar experience. And then I'll turn it over to Jonathan, to talk about how, so Liminal sort of had two sides to it, right? It was like the software company and then the services component to it. And there's color on the services side.
Absolutely, for sure. So under our services, we did a lot of variety of video production work and live streaming and broadcast. But for the most part, we focused on helping customers take the ISO foundation and then build it out into very large workflows to specifically address challenging or large production specific needs. An example would be is if you had an event that needed 10 different meetings to all live there and aggregate all of the participant information into a searchable list that allows you to modify or interact with. That's something that can be done with ZoomOSC, but it requires some custom work outside in Isadora or another third-party program to be able to combine information and process it. So those are the kind of stuff we did under the services. We also designed workflows. So for example, what's a good way to have a ZoomISO contribution machine and go from the multiple Macs that are injecting the video all the way down to vMix or. So these are the kind of things we consulted with and helped install for clients. And it's something we're hoping to do and continue to do with Zoom as we move forward.
Very good. Well, thanks for those explanations. Got a little bit level set in the meeting and the audience, and certainly, I know early on it used to just be command line for the most part, right? I mean, it kind of started at that raw base, and then you added to it. And the point being, it's a protocol, right? And it's a feature set. And how you call those commands and so forth is really up to you. And Universe Control or Stream Deck or Isadora, and I imagine others. Those are the three that I'm most familiar with. But it's not tied to a particular surface controller, and as long as it can see and so forth, it can make some real magic happen. I'm like, ZoomOSC is all you wish Zoom would have, right? And it just remains quicker. I mean, Stream Deck out at times to where throws up, the names on the buttons of the people in the meeting, or if I know it's going to be a large meeting of 6-8 people, if I know who the key players are, the moderators, the speakers, and so forth, then I just pre-build that list of those individuals, and those are the buttons that get pre-populated when they arrive in the meeting, and I don't have to worry about burning a bunch of buttons for everybody else who I'm never going to spotlight and so forth. But and then I recall one of those lab days where I think it was an Isadora focus with ZoomOSC, and I said I think I had teed it up and said it would be kind of cool that if somebody raised, and I think you might have even put this now, but when you when somebody raises their hand, that they get spotlit, or we might have done muted and unmuted. But needless to say, something happened that you wish for it to be the trigger to spotlight them and so forth. And so the necessarily, it was just a good workflow example of things you can pay attention to or listen to and do something in response through Isadora. But the raise hand, even on a Stream Deck, which, Stream Deck's not a decision maker, but at the same time, it kind of feels like it in this example of, let's say I've got an event coming up. Customer definitely says, hey, we need to have a moment, where we invite people to raise their digital hands. And so Andy made it possible to reconfigure however many buttons you wish that are basically listening for the hand raise. And when the hand raise, it automatically the name, and in Companion, you program in the actions behind that to maybe spotlight and unmute at a single button press. And when their hand, and you can lower their hand as well. And they leave my button on my Stream Deck and they get unspotlit, they get remuted, and their hand is lowered and away they go. So things like that, anybody who's managed a Zoom meeting or a large Zoom event knows those are tasks nobody wants to approach with a mouse, and that's why it I think it just reigns. Very powerful for cleanliness and smoothness and so forth, even if it's just a Zoom production, no branding, no transfer of vMix, OBS or whatnot, but it can still look and feel really good without a whole pauses and hiccups and a show caller in your ear yelling at you to spotlight somebody because it takes too doggone long, and so forth. So it's done just so many good things. I want to check with, are there some questions?
Yeah, we
wrapping
got
up
a
there?
couple. The first one is putting this out there. And let's see, this one says, for enterprise customers, will there be a path for SSO integration into the ZoomOSC platform?
So I can say a couple of things on that. So if you're an SSO customer right now, the current guidance that we were offering was to enable the alternate account password. When you do that, you're able to then sign into the account with whatever password, and like sign in with Google or sign in with a service provider, so everybody's clear about what we're talking about here. That's not something that pops up in the ZoomOSC application because the authentication is really the way that Zoom had handled that through the SDK in the past didn't really have a path to what we would call proper OAuth. Now, what I can say, because this is public information now, the last SDK update, proper OAuth implementation has been brought to the SDK. There's a way for the properly integrate with SSO and deal with all that at an org level. So, while today, again, the guidance with the app that you can download immediately is enable the alternate password for the account and sign in with that, the SDK now supports a full OAuth stack, and that's obviously something we're looking at.
Thanks for that. I imagine when you were answering that question, it's going through my mind, it'll it's an assumption, but I've seen a couple of articles about it that says over the next year many of these features will be integrated, and that the standalone product may may lose the singular purpose of itself, standalone purpose that it has today, as they get into Zoom. And my point is
I
not
think
that that's
maybe
the
drive-
absolute.
Yeah.
Go ahead. An absolute prediction on my part that is exactly what's going to happen. My real point is it's gonna be, I imagine, a very intricate balance of you say, do we develop it in your code, Andy, that what you've been living and developing for this last year and a half or two, or does it begin to get integrated, or do you develop differently so that down the road it can more easily get integrated? I don't know what all those challenges are.
I can give you a little bit of guidance on that. So,
sure.
This is, as Sam sort of alluded to, we are not jumping in without a plan here. We spent months and months and months meticulously looking through every part of how we want to handle this transition, so that we're one with a very complete plan about how we want to handle this integration. And I think that the two main tenets I was sort of summarizing in my head how to approach this for you guys is that number one is preservation of workflows. So all those things that we just discussed that you can do with Zoom, it's our goal to be able to make sure that there's no gap in capability that from this merger between Liminal and Zoom, but that the focus is on the workflows. The way or the specific interaction that you do to get to that point may change over the years, as everything does. I mean, even just with the Zoom platform itself, right? There's a lot of migration there, and there'll be necessary change, good change, all of that. But that the goal is that there's a preservation of workflow. So those opportunities to be able to build like input output relationships, like when I mute somebody, remove them from a multi-spotlight, or when they raise their hand, have that show up on a stream deck. Like the idea of openness and the way that the platform handled that, the way that we handled individual export of video, the goal is that the workflows that you guys built on top of that software is maintained. And then the second goal is integration, right? Has been over the next year looking at how we we act not as separate entities, which again is, you go to the Liminal ET website, you can see everything is basically the same for you guys. It's the same download system, the same purchase system, all of that is the same. Over time, obviously what we want to do is have a single-minded sort of, not single-minded in a negative connotation, but a consistent approach to that, a more integrated, consolidated experience customer to be able to interact with the Zoom platform, because now these are Zoom tools. And so we want to bring that closer together over the course of the year while maintaining everything that I just said about the workflows, that there's no gap in capability as we inch things closer and closer together over time.
Very cool. Thanks for that clarification. Back to Guy.
Next question's coming in from Josh Cox. Will the ZoomISO for Windows product continue to be developed, or are the PC ISO tools slated to be released as a native Zoom service as a result of this acquisition?
So today we don't have specific announcements on any product or feature. We're really hoping to focus on the general idea of what we're talking about here, which is, yes, these things that we had as either roadmap items or these are things that aren't being forgotten. We're just migrating together. But now we have a larger vocabulary and a larger range of tools at our disposal to be able to figure out how we want to address these things. Like taking the Windows example, that is cloud, right? Because that's really where Windows is a prevalent, really until you get into some some fringe and expensive solutions, that's really the way you have to do it, is to deploy Windows-based platforms for production. So thinking about now, how do all of those production-based workflows. Again, it's not just about the apps themselves, right? The acquisition certainly brought over those assets, but really what this is an opportunity to do is to, for Jonathan and I to advocate inside of Zoom and then actually work every day on servicing the workflows that we know that remote contribution and producers need. So when it comes to will a specific feature or will a specific workflow be available in the Zoom platform, I can't give you a specific answer today. What I can say is that we are certainly aware and hope to have demonstrated over our time together that we do understand those needs. And now we are taking the opportunity to look at the platform and figure out how do we address those needs and improve everything about production or bigger.
And Josh follows up on that one with, might there be unique features available when ZoomISO for PC is launched?
So there's definitely, I will say this, the fact that we're now not a third-party integrator with the Zoom SDK opens a lot of doors. You all know this, as I'm sure, we now have the opportunity to do a lot of things that we've wanted to do for a long time. Align internal things before as a third party, obviously for security and all. But we have the opportunity to make a lot more change now as a single entity. And I think that's where a lot of the excitement around this is drumming up from. We can work together to solutions versus having to wait for, let's say, a feature to be public and be scalable for all third-party integrator possible. We can work more internally to figure out what the right feature and the right balance is. So we're certainly going to take advantage. Keeping an eye on what the SDK is bringing to market is also a really good indicator of what capabilities are available on the platform. You heard Brendan talk about on office hours this week that raw data is now available through the SDKs. You've heard me talk two and two together for you, but I think you can figure out exactly why this is important to us, that these sort of things are coming to the platform. We talked a lot about what the roadblocks were, and I think you're seeing a lot of those removed. So you can think about that from the perspective, okay, well, I'm looking at what's happening. Okay, I'm looking at what Liminal's priorities were. I'm looking at their commitment to being able to preserve those workflows and scale them inside the platform. I think you can kind of triangulate where we're going from that.
Yeah, very cool. Can you describe your role? I mean, what's your title? What team have you joined? Have you joined a group of developers? Are you managing that group of developers in the Zoom?
Sure. So everybody at Liminal is doing something a little different. So I'll speak for myself, and then I'll let Jonathan give some color as well. I'm coming in as the events engineering manager. So I'm under the engineering org inside of Zoom, and I'll be handling the construction of applications and workflows and solutions through the software facing element of the company, the actual engineering and building of things I'm going to be taking a look very specifically at engineering with events in mind. So when we're thinking about how we build solutions for the events market, myself and the team that'll be working with me, we are focused on that vertical inside of the Zoom platform. Obviously, there's many things that it serves, but we're looking specifically at events engineering. So I'll be managing. I'll also say before I pass it to Jonathan that a lot of the faces that you saw at Liminal beyond us are also coming in various different capacities. So you'll see, on the support side, which I'm sure Jonathan and Sam will go into more detail on, that a lot of familiar faces will continue. But it's not just Jonathan and myself, and then everybody else we're sort of saying goodbye to. It's really is a thoughtful transition of how things are going on. Turn to Jonathan and Sam.
One thing I actually want to clarify real quick there is the word events, and the word events there is not with the Zoom Events product. Zoom Events product certainly plays into it and has in a lot of places a shared customer base. So how future features get productized by Zoom, how they get just what licenses they end up getting grouped into is to be determined at this point. But it's actually really interesting to note that the team that Andy is going to be managing is actually separate from the Zoom Events product team, though very, very tightly knit to them.
Very good. Thanks for that. Yeah, as I read it, I thought imagined a development team for the Zoom Events platform, and that's where you were getting hooked in. So that clarification helps a lot. Jonathan.
Yeah, for sure. So Andy's things with events development and engineering. I'm moving over to work under Sam, under the event specialist team. And so Zoom Event Services does a lot of things related to at Zoom, really take the most advantage of the platform, both specifically, but also just through other conferences and things you can do with Zoom. And I'm excited because I'll be able to help Sam tools that will really streamline their workflow and expand what kind of again, if you think back to what Liminal's been doing for the past year and a half, is we've been taking ZoomOSC and ZoomISO, and then internally and for other customers, we've been finding ways to really hack it apart and expand the and take on these larger projects. So that's something that doing with Zoom in collaboration, we can hopefully take on bigger projects and kind of show the rest of the industry what's possible and develop new workflows for taking collaboration.
Sam, you're a lucky guy.
No, we're excited to have him because and actually this kind of leads into Bill Hop's question here in the chat. I was talking about the clear delineation of Liminal's dual focus on the in-meeting Zoom experience versus leveraging other Zoom infrastructure for integration into broadcast experiences, and asking what focus going forward. Is it about new broadcast opportunities, or is it about continuing to up the in-meeting experience? And this is something that I got to say on. I'm pretty sure I've probably said it here at this point, but talking about the dual focus and how that's already been a piece of Zoom. It continues. What Zoom has already announced with some of the additional webinar branding and backstage and some of those things. It's features you've seen released in our NDI integration within Zoom Rooms that I know Greg here uses a lot. There's always been this dual focus of roles. That's actually why my team exists, is within event services. My team is specifically one of those focuses, and the rest of the team is the other focus. So now Jonathan's coming in to work for me on this focus with ZoomOSC and ZoomISO, because they kind of alluded to it earlier, but like ZoomOSC doesn't do anything. ZoomOSC does nothing on its own. It allows you to use those other pieces and to integrate into those other systems, and it's absolutely crucial for that. But and wild with Universe and with Companion, with Isadora, with all the different systems that are out there or will become out there, or we may find, and additionally, to really start to turn this into.
Yeah, absolutely. Not sure if you can, clearly respond to this. I don't think there's ever really, I being out in the audience, if you will, looking in to Zoom and features and wish lists features as well. Can you help at least this audience understand the list of things that are evaluated that selfishly, just like we wouldn't even have those things on our bulleted list, right? But they're of critical importance to Zoom and the world market that they're serving versus just the production market, if you will. I think CPU resources, memory, things like that along the way. Does that make sense, Sam?
I mean, it does, but I don't think it's the answer. The answer is when you look at Zoom and you look at all the different types of businesses that we serve in every region of the world, in every business, in every vertical, we're in education, we're in government, where security is absolutely top crucial. We're FedRAMP over there with our Zoom. We're in healthcare, where your needs are so much different than an enterprise business, which is so much different than mid-market, just so much different than production. And all of these things and all these different customers are obviously vying for the features that would be really crucial to them. At the same time, we're always working with they have money for equipment. They'll put the most ridiculous computer running their Zoom room, and they need to be able to share 4K 120 hertz HDR with Atmos sound, and they have all these requirements to be able to. And then at the same time, we need to be able to run the Zoom client for in an impoverished country, or we need to be able to run it on an oil rig, and you need to be able to run it with just no data at all. Often it's incredibly reliable. It needs a Zoom phone and needing to pass in with E911. So there's a limitless number of different use cases for the Zoom products and different requirements thereof. So we're constantly trying to do our best to balance all of those and serve all those businesses.
I think the thing that's been so interesting in the latest sort of language that's been coming out of Zoom is looking at Zoom as a communications company. Whereas maybe we had first approached it as like strict video conferencing, but it really is talking about all the different ways that humans converse with each other, right? We communicate as individuals and as groups and as societies, right? So, and that stems into all sorts of different verticals, as Sam was just saying. But I think what's exciting to me is to see Zoom sort of turning the guns now at events as a type of communications, and all the ways that can serve events as a real way that, whether it's one to many, many to many, many to one, even in so many different like interview types of scenarios, that communications event is a type of communications, and that's all of the different capabilities that Zoom builds to serve that are really explicitly focused on through these latest moves that they've been making in the sector.
And that's where, this is not a well-kept secret at all, but it may not have fully made it out there. You guys may not have seen quite the amount of growth that Zoom is putting into events is insane. Our event services team, our Zoom events offering, the aggression that we have towards really establishing what we already had, it was so interesting to me in 2020, watching the world come to us, whether we were for events, the sort of deals we were competing in, that in large parts, it was really interesting to me watching us competing against that just have a completely different architecture. They cheat. They get to buffer. We don't get to buffer. We're fast. And watching and doing like head-to-head shootouts of video quality with things like SRT or with YouTube and other services that got to buffer and just really do things in, again, technologically completely different ways, and still watching all the people that wanted to be on Zoom because my CEO knows how to use Zoom, or my audience knows how to use Zoom, or it just works, or it works with any bandwidth other than my camera at the moment that doesn't. But all that to say that, oh, come on.
There you go.
All that to say, Zoom has been completely doubling and tripling down on events, and I think you guys should be really excited to be the target of such now a large behemoth of a company coming after you with a vengeance to really make your world great.
Yeah.
And it's an exciting time to be in events.
Well, I mean, if we, I don't remember the month when you first showed up in the Zoom test kitchen, Sam. I didn't look back.
I think it was in the spring of this year, wasn't it? Maybe.
I would have guessed late March to April.
Yeah.
So, you know, and I'm sure that was at least a soft indicator of your research. You know,
But and I had been
into-
watching you guys for a long time, but like our blog for the last 3 blog posts we have, I think. One was Frost and Sullivan naming us a market leader, an industry leader in virtual event solutions. One was the Liminal acquisition announcement, which also announced 2 other major investments we had made, and the fact that we had launched event services and are just completely doubling down on event services. And then the third one was the end of year blog, which talks about all the features that came out or are coming out. And so many of them are very event specific.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't, I mean, we're definitely talking to a group, I think, that don't believe virtual events are going anywhere, but and whether they're dedicated or hybrid, I think we have to prepare for both.
I was talking to my wife the other day about it, actually, about how exciting it is for me right now that we are leading the whole virtual and that we're stepping into whatever form it takes, because we're able to get crews together and people are willing to spend money now. And we're able to do big production again. Like going to virtual was very successful for a lot of people. But I think now that we've kind of woken up the idea that a virtual audience or virtual speakers are options, but now we're returning just enough to really being big production to the table and put back into these events and really push the boundaries on what they can be. I'm way more excited about this year than I was about last year for what virtual and hybrid is going to do.
Yeah, agreed. And I think, you know, I think about it often in a sense of, you know, I think anybody who thinks that everybody's just going to roll back to the old way is just not thinking about it enough, because there's been too much learned by organizations from kind of having a gun to their head and having to go virtual, right? You know, one, they've learned through producers or production companies, right? They know they have the contacts now. It may have in-house now that they didn't have a year and a half or 2 ago. The other is the broadened audience. To pull out of virtual events today means to disregard who knows how many people that have been newly integrated into your, if you will, over the last, you know. And so the choice to that part of the audience is absurd. The opportunity for very powerful, you know, not often available speakers, teachers, trainers, and so forth. We trimmed off all the travel up front, the travel out back, the expenses associated to it, and so forth, to be able to bring them in virtually and know exactly, you know, how to accommodate them. So I have too much to lose by rolling back to the old. I think companies that do that will be categorized a bit foolish. You know, does it have to be 100% virtual? Maybe not, but the virtual remote audience is going to have to feel like a dedicated, you know, event for them, even if it is a mixed venue, if you will. So there's a lot of great things coming. Guy, I'm going to go back to you. I know there's a lot of questions stacking up. So
got another one
question.
Sure. There's Lopez Watermelon, and he asks, what is your philosophy when it comes to keeping the abstraction go see through as Adora, QLab, and others versus having more of the functionality be ported to a dashboard or web function? Workflow is important to me as a theater practitioner. Is there a potential divergence in needs between theater and broadcast?
I think that's very relevant question. All of the we've been exploring together protocols over the past year. You know, we implemented which is a native protocol, right? It's IP based. It's IP packets, right? Locally, terrestrially. Across the board, though, you have a variety of solutions that exist, all the way from the APIs, right, where you're doing web requests and you're dealing with large databases. You've seen Zoom implement that themselves through like the Zoom Room and SSH and all of the ways that that engages with the room controller remotely. There's been you can remotely control some component and get data from it through the APIs and things like that. I think what was critical to making ZoomOSC successful, though, was the fact that it could be deployed in a very conventional way for broadcast and theater. I think this is an area where they do intersect, where you know, when you're looking at a studio system, studio does rely on very conventional LAN-based setups and communications between devices. And that's definitely been something that I've already been, you know, advocating for the importance of. That, you know, it's not acceptable in certain production situations to have an authenticated SSH pipeline to, you know, because your soundboard is going to look at that and be like, well, what's this? I don't know what that is. You know, I've got no way of communicating with that. So it's important, I think, to have both a variety, because, you know, there are things where REST APIs are going to exceed the capabilities of OSC. For example, the migration of large databases of information, you know, that's really what it was built for, and that's where it exceeds, of course, for the native terrestrial protocols that are, you know, communicating through IP infrastructure. So I'd say that, you know, my guidance on that is that, yeah, that is a top of mind consideration for me, is how do we not only, you know, it's how do we do the most good through available and making sure that there's no specific workflow left behind. I think that what this merger should, you know, hopefully communicate some confidence on is that, you know, when we say something is top of mind, we're now saying that not only as like, sort of like a third party analyst, but we're saying that very directly as, you know, as members of the team that's focusing on these things, that like, yeah, this is something that's important, we're going to be advocating for on your behalf, you know, about making sure that we don't forget about those workflows and what's deployed.
Very good. Thanks, Andy. Let me add real quickly, Guy, before you ask the question. In the audience here today, if you have some rebuttal or question that's, you know, related to directly what was just answered, feel free to use your digital hand, if you will, and we'll let that come in rather than have it get lost in the chat, because it's really hard to link them together. But feel free to raise that digital hand if you have some feedback. Go ahead, Guy.
Alrighty, this next one's coming in from David Brady in New York City, and he says, are there any plans to incorporate any or methods of the liminal IP into the Zoom platform natively, if it is only an additional tier, i.e. free enterprise and, let's say, production?
Well, I think there's again, there's two that, right? Because again, Liminal came at you at two different directions, as a software vendor and then also as a service provider. And but I think you'll see that the way that both things are being handled are very similar in a certain sense, where I think, again, the language that's in the press releases and things is clear that the goal is integration and consolidation of these capabilities. That what's not happening here is Zoom coming and sort of darkening the workflows that we had provided, like Sam had sort of alluded to with the hug of death, right? Like we wanted to avoid that. We wanted to make sure very explicitly that there wasn't a gap in capability. And that's why ZoomOSC and ZoomISO are available via the same tools and methods that you had integrated with them before. You know, there's no immediate change, there's no disruptive change that comes from working with that. The long term, I think, yeah, you'll see, again, it's about the way that a certain workflow might be expressed inside of the Zoom platform in the future may change, but it's still that workflow. It's still that capability that you had. And those are the kind of things that, yeah, we'll be looking very, very carefully at. And then with services, you're also seeing, I think, the sort of pioneering of level of integration for the Zoom platform, where, you know, like ZoomOSC and ZoomISO had open workflows that we had just discussed on the product side, but now it's actually, okay, now what do we do on top of that? Because it's, you know, that's layer one, is getting the application to market, but then all the things that you can do with it past that, I think you're going to see, you know, event services really be a leader in just and really trafficking of, you know, how these things are done, because they're, you know, with Jonathan there, they're going to have really a look at those things very explicitly.
I have to say I'm going to miss the roadmap conversations with Andy. But I do look forward to what's still coming as far as features and so forth. So very good. Guy, you got
all right, next one's in from George Kennedy, and he says, now that all these systems, ZoomOSC, ZoomISO, and Zoom are converging into a new have a well-trained community of operators/engineers and technicians.
So right off the bat there, Zoom just redid its support site, has the Learning Center now. And I think that's what you can see as the direction that we're taking going forward. Obviously, we're going to be expanding that and making sure, as advocates from the inside, we'll be making sure that the right courses are ending up on there that talk about all of Zoom's tools, including what's now become Zoom tools and what will be the future versions of these features that may exist wherever they do exist within the platform. But I think training for the industry and kind of being transparent and for the industry has always been a tenet of mine. If you've looked before, I was doing the test kitchen and coming to events like this with webinars that my team was hosting ourselves, directly making sure that really we are trying to be out here and be a voice for what's the possibilities with Zoom. What can you do to push the boundaries? Even more than we're here to be here, I will do the service directly.
Yeah, George, you want to go ahead and add into that? George, were you going to add into that one?
Sorry about that. So I think what we saw during the pandemic, while eventually most of the technicians caught on, or the end users caught on in the end, is that we have a lot of folks that left the industry because they couldn't, catch on to what was going on with the vertical lift of virtual production. So, we talked about it yesterday in office hours, so it'll be a good idea to kind of see where I just, oftentimes in the AV industry, we just put out products and we don't have enough training for it. So I would love to see this be a focus, not necessarily that we have folks that not just have more technicians just coming in to do it because of doing it, that, we have people that understand the technology that's being worked around with Liminal and Zoom coming together now.
Yeah, and I guess I have two thoughts on that. One is you're going to see ways that we have to do outreach and to make sure the resources are there. At that point, I want to take off my Zoom hat for a second and put on my industry hat and say that in general, not Zoom specific, but in general about the virtual event path that everyone had to take together in this past 2 years, there were resources. There were a lot of great resources. And anytime that I, as a hiring manager, as I'm looking at new applicants and applying for different roles on my team or in other places of the business, if I'm looking at them and I ask them, hey, what have you been doing for the past 2 years? And they don't have a good story for me, I kind of wonder why. And I've seen that across the industry, like the people that are in rooms like this, the people in rooms like the office hours that are figuring out how to get out there. One of the team members that I remember bringing on last year, I asked them what sort of Zoom experience they had, and they told me the story about how they went and they volunteered to end up backstage at a show being a Zoom op because they were like, nope, this is the future. I need to get on this. Get me in front of a computer. Let me do this. Before that, they had been an event planner. Like, okay, event planning, good. That's taking a pause. Zoom is where it's at. Virtual callers is where it's at. Put me in front of a laptop. I will run Zoom for your shows. Let me figure out how to do it. The resources are out there. And this is, again, putting my Zoom hat on, we're going to make lots of great resources for you. Taking it, there are resources there, and it's everyone's responsibility. The people that don't take advantage of them are going to pass out of the industry. Advantage resources available to you and are constantly trying to better yourselves are the ones that are going to rise to the top. And I've seen it time and time again throughout my career, starting off in theater, live AV, now here. That's my word as a mentor. the young up and comers in the industry is, man, just keep learning somehow.
Yeah, it's a biggie. Back in the day, to show my age, I used to go to bed every night with 4-inch books on Windows NT Server and programming books and so forth. I mean, and I think I think we've had questions. I've had self of is it complementary or competitive, right? And I think where I've settled is simply this. I have to continue to trust a company that I've learned to trust, and that's Zoom. And in doing the right things and sharing, the knowledge and the features and all and so forth. So it's one of those things, and the team can't even scale without qualified candidates, right? And there's some great buckets to put yourself into, your office hours and Zoom Test Kitchen, and I'm sure you have, but yeah, they've got to be out there to be scale and so forth. So
well, and that's Zoom hat back on for a second, that like my team benefits from having strong candidates. And if you guys heard office hours, or you've heard me, we definitely have, my team as a services provider has a very teach a man to fish mentality with other production companies. Our goal is to get you successful and then let you go run and do shows, because for Zoom as a whole, that's our benefit. Our benefit look good and who make our product and our to get successful and then let you go run really great shows, because with Zoom as the hard platform for those shows, that's what it's all about.
Yeah, absolutely.
George, you had another.
Yeah, thanks, Sam, for that feedback. What I would say is lessons learned for the entire live industry as where we need to be. I mean, I always told folks, that I work with, they always wonder why George Kennedy is up at 3:00 in the morning banging it out. Not a lot of folks understand, and I think we just it's a big lesson for a lot of us in this industry to be not only on the technical side as far as but owners of AV companies also. You have the whole industry as one and not these two different segments. And also, that's all I'm going to say about that.
Guy, you have another question teed up for us?
Yeah, we got one in from Laura Thompson, and she says, if Zoom is an approved, when will I be able to say that it's a new product from an already approved vendor?
I mean, that's all dependent on how your IT. At this point, the asset is owned by Zoom. The ZoomOSC code base is owned by, has been through our security review. Was not coded by Zoom engineers, though it is now, I guess. But Zoom owns it, and that may be enough for your IT to say, well, if Zoom reviewed it, we trust Zoom. I am sure that many IT organizations out there are going to want to scrutinize each product. And obviously there are different things with ZoomOSC and ZoomISO. They have OSC calls in them, which is a totally new thing to the Zoom. So they probably will have more scrutiny and should have more scrutiny. It's warranted.
Thank you. I can't even get that process started though until it's from an approved vendor on the approved vendor list from the state, which is what I wanted to make sure of.
If they buy it today, they're buying. Andy, can you correct me on this? They're buying it from Zoom if they buy it today.
Yes. Right. So everything is at this point, it's been through Zoom security review. It's owned by Zoom, and while Liminal is the brand from which you're purchasing it, it is a Zoom-owned brand, and it's a Zoom-owned domain, and it's a Zoom-owned product at this point. Isn't a party beyond the brand anymore.
Now, it may still be a little bit of a challenge. I think the actual license purchase, I don't think you're going to be able to go through the quote process with an AE that they might, the quote PO process might be different at the moment as we get sales, because one of the things with that, I don't tell anyone about it until it happens so we don't leak it. So like we have a whole new hurdle to get over now of getting sales on board and our SKUs and all that. But from a
At
legal
some point that
sense.
will be the PO process and all that. I mean, because the first thing I want to do is I want them to get the free version and bang on it a little bit, and get some of them up to speed on that first. But yeah, so you will eventually, that'll all eventually work through Zoom though.
I don't think any of us are able to commit to being able to purchase ZoomOS on a Zoom quote necessarily.
Okay. University side, but I just wanted to make sure that because it's owned by, that gives me a place to start. I appreciate
It's
that.
definitely owned by, and if you go to the website now, it's going to say it's owned by Zoom at the bottom. The EULA that you agree to is Zoom's.
That's good. It just like we had this conversation 2 months ago and they're like, no, it's not on the approved vendor list. We can't even look at it.
Right.
Next question.
Next one's coming in from Rupert McRae, and he asks, can you tell us about Jumpstart by Zoom?
It's awesome, and you should check it out. I can say that for sure. It's super cool. Yeah, and it was, I think, for those of you who are unfamiliar, Zoom just put out a blog post about some things you might have missed this year that maybe, were either mentioned at Zoomtopia or in other areas, and Jumpstart is one of those. And it's basically a low-code environment to be able to begin to interface with certain, I believe it's starting with video SDK behaviors, and you can start to like get into a web page or something like that. It's but it's a low code getting started point. Really innovative idea of thinking again. Zoom's a company. Now we're talking about communications company. This is like the white labeling of a lot of the technology, and to see it introduced in a low code is a really, really cool concept.
Got another question. AV Trainer, and AV Trainer asks, given that developer of tech, but also a system design, custom programming, and production partner to many of its clients, how does it affect this level of relationship to Liminal's clients and their projects? Will Liminal also be able to maintain its role as an umbrella for its clients using tools such as Isadora?
So that's what, as we were going through planning out for the acquisition, one was my knowledge of the existing products and what we were trying to buy. And then my other one was this idea that we were going to put Jonathan inside of my org, since we kind of have this already going. Zoom already has event services. We have a way to spin up scope of works on a limited basis for, cool, we want consultants or we want someone to build out this for us. And it's turn that over into, great, I have this idea for a custom Isadora interface or a companion Isadora and ZoomOSC to all talk to each other. I just don't have time to deal with it right now. Can I just pay you to build this for me? And yes, we have a great way to right off the bat be able to contract that and be able to work with that on a consulting, on a systems design, on a small like configuration workflow method there that Jonathan was already doing over there. And we're just able to allow him and Andy to both kind of come into the same roles they had there here. And that's Jonathan's role.
And I think that's a really important point that, the company's called Liminal because it had a dual focus on software and services, and that the synergy between that was what made us. What's so cool about the way that we've handled bringing this team together is that we're able to maintain that structure, inside of a massive organization like Zoom, we have that bridge of capability for everybody.
Good stuff. Who next, guy?
Elliot Robinson asks, how do you increase reliability for network connectivity for Zoom events, such as connections to multiple Zoom data centers or SD-WAN?
So I don't have a great answer for this. I guess the answer that I'll give for this is that a lot of people come and talk to event services because they're like, we want your special bat signal. We want your special tools that you have on the back end. And what I tell people is that we don't have. We run our events the same way you guys do, with a computer as your endpoint running Zoom, going up to the cloud, and then additional redundant hot swappable backups is great to have. If you have them on the call, if you their video on, just not spotlit, muted, something happens to your main one, you can turn the other one on. That and having redundant internet ISPs is where you're at for reliability at the moment.
All right, we got one in from Felipe Nardi, and he says, "Will Zoom preserve the ability to third-party integrators create workflows, or will workflows be a
is a priority for us? That, you know, if you have a certain way of interacting with, like for example, a multi-spotlight workflow, right? That can what you can read from integration is that those are priority workflows, right, and things like that. Now, those who use ZoomOSC as a in-meeting API, I think should engage with our transition services and folks like to discuss what the range of options are, because now it's an enhanced range of options versus a reduced range of options. I think that's really important to be clear about. Like, you know, with that we don't have with Zoom, so we have the opportunity now to offer things that we couldn't have ever offered before, while we're looking at structural changes to how things are handled here. So I would say that as a third-party integrator, using ZoomOSC as a window into the Zoom platform for a third-party service or a resale service or value-added services and things like that, you're going to want to connect with Nolan as your partner for success on to steer that and find exactly where, you know, you want to be there. So he'll be able to give specific, that's one of his main objectives, to be able to give specific guidance to those customers who are not as producers specifically, but as platform-wide integrators. How do they want to engage with now the entire Zoom platform, of which Liminal's a piece? So you're going to see a lot of new opportunities there, I think, and it'll be good to work with Nolan to figure out exactly what for you in your business.
And adding, and just before, but Zoom has made great strides to increase communications and their access to their SDK in general. So I think just again, broad answer to that question as well is Zoom really is encouraging third-party. I mean, the Zoom Apps Fund specifically, the Zoom Apps to push additional integrations. Now, of course, the SDK development and Zoom Apps development are different, but we definitely encourage look and start up those conversations with Zoom. And from the inside, we're hoping to be a part of that, to respond to those conversations, to participate within interactions, and make sure that it's important. Again, Liminal has always based software off the idea that you need to be able to integrate with our software. We're trying to make it easier to integrate with Zoom through our software. And that philosophy and that principle is still going to continue even when we're inside Zoom.
Thanks for that. What's up next, Guy?
Next one from Marty, and he asks, considering all the growth in event services, Zoom does an exceptionally good job of speech quality, but audio quality for music events has been the highest audio quality Zoom is currently capable of, and are there plans to upgrade it?
So I've been like scrolling down my chat waiting for this one. I wanted it. So I mean, I guess one of my questions is if you're doing it with the latest version of original sound, because high fidelity audio actually it launched at Zoomtopia last year, didn't it? That was the first time we did it, because I remember recording the videos for that. And that's where high fidelity mode came through a couple small iterations since then, but it's 48K audio. And honestly, I came to Zoom as a DSP programmer. I came to Zoom Room DSPs. So audio has definitely been my background for a lot of this, and they very quickly kind of ended up sicking me on the audio team as we went through all the different Zoom Rooms levels and different versions of original sound when we first launched it years back, and then high fidelity mode and our audio on mixing multiple MXL mics and stuff like that in Zoom Rooms, which is really, really crazy cool, and kind of making my job irrelevant at that point. All of those things were about not needing a DSP that was manually configured and just letting it automatically happen. And like I say, I've been amazed at what the what the audio engine can do now versus a handful of years ago. At an event level with high fidelity audio mode turned on, I have no complaints about our audio. Like I audio becomes just not even a thought anymore. So if you're not already using that, definitely encourage you to make sure you are. If you are using that, having an issue.
Yeah, we're definitely using original sound in high fidelity mode. So I've been mixing some of the Belfast method events.
Okay.
You know, we're doing music performance from remote sites, and I'll be working on a larger event in about. And so a couple of different ways that we are channeling audio. So there's the final product that is sent out to the public, but as the production mixer, I'm on a different Zoom call that is coming directly from the board at the location. And so I'm listening to the monitor output or the program output, and I need to have that in as real time as possible and as high quality as possible, because I'm actually making critical decisions in EQ and compression and, panning and that kind of thing. And we're just wishing that it could do more or better. We're actually looking at maybe, some other audio for monitoring, and I kind of wish we didn't have to.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure if it's the codec or the encoding, whether there's some phasing issues that are going on, but we're wishing for more.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like I said, I think with high fidelity, it's there for and I think I'm not directly on the audio engineering team. I'm not on the product team. I think calling it the end state would be factually inaccurate. They're always working on how they can improve it and what the next levels are, both in reliability and in quality and speed.
All right, Nick.
Is there any difference? I think I know the answer to this, but is there any difference in audio quality based on subscription?
No.
Yeah. Just wanted to get that out.
Yeah, definitely not.
Go ahead, Guy.
All right, Pete's asking a newer version of the Zoom Stream Deck plugin with features that are in ZoomOSC without having to program everything for ZoomOSC via Companion.
I think it's the companion paradigm was such an important part of the ZoomOSC story, because that was how the vast majority of folks here and across our customer base in general interacted with Zoom. To be able to, and it made sense because you could just look at the keys and you could see the names of the people and color indications about whether they're muted or had their, and it was really consolidated, and it made Zoom feel like a console, right? Which is like what I think there's a paradigm shift to just press buttons and interact directly with the functions that you. So Stream Deck is a top of mind consideration for me when we're looking at preserving workflows and enhancing workflows inside of the Zoom platform. It's an incredibly important part of that story. The specific shape and flavor of how that will come out, I think, will depend on a lot of circumstances, depending. And I don't want to get too far into specific details because we're still ironing a lot of that out. But I think that you see a couple different paradigms when you think about integrating, right? You see like Stream Deck button press, I'm going to make the choice to initiate the action paradigm. And then you also see things where what I call them are input output, where Universe and Isadora are coming in and saying, okay, if this, then that, do this action. Rules and types of automations around this meeting, basically put in these additional parameters and let them shape the call in the way that it plays out. And I think that you can see those sort of in different camps, and I think there's going to be ways to optimize one or the other as we think about how integrations move forward.
And again, as well, so under Liminal, we really focused on tools and technologies for a very specific group. We knew that event producers, broadcast professionals, these were the kind of groups that were using our software, and they needed the advanced technical needs. Again, without getting into details, and Andy said we're still just having these discussions, I'm excited about the fact that working with Zoom, now these features are not just going to a specific broadcast subset, but there are potentially features which could be a broad range. An example is the Stream Deck. I mean, a direct integration with the Stream Deck won't just benefit the broadcast producers, it will benefit quite a lot of other people, from educators to CEOs who need simple button pushes to just the average user. I think it's an interesting opportunity for a change in mentality, and some of the features that Andy and I think of as exclusively for broadcast more useful in general, and that's something.
I think also keep an eye on the BitFocus companion. It's open source. You can see when people are working on it. If you look at it already, you know that's not the end of the story with companion mod.
Good stuff. What's up next?
Next one's coming in from AV Trainer, and he says, Sam, please talk more about these MX and how they need to be set up for fidelity sound. Is there a way to control these better with the ZoomOSC?
Well, so going back, that would be like the ones I'm talking about are for the Zoom Room side of things, and it's the AC4 iterations of it, the 360, the other versions they have of it. Boundary mics, they go on the table, and then specifically, you're not using high fidelity mode with them. You're using the absolute crap out of Zoom Audio DSP, as opposed to high fidelity, which basically like bypass as much of it as you possibly can. I have a good mic. I have a closed loop. I don't have echo. Let me sound good. This is, I have a conference room and I need you to make it magic. It lets Zoom Audio DSP do its magic. If you want to look up that, if you look at our hardware guides on our support site for the Zoom rooms, you'll see some with the MXL mics. And let me tell you, as an audio guy, it blew me away how well it works and how stupid, cheap, and simple it is. It takes tens of thousands of dollars of really good mics and a really great programmer to beat it, honestly. If we're talking about like for voice or something like that, like in a personal setup, not the way to go. I will give my one additional piece of feedback. In my opinion, I went to do a bunch of mic shootouts and stuff. I came to the, if I couldn't get a mic really close, like, I mean, I stand right here, you see everybody's mics out here. If I'm not doing something like that, where I have a mic at me, if I'm gonna have like a Blue Yeti or something like that, but on the table, the MXL mic is as good. If I'm not gonna get it placed where it needs to go, the MXL mic is fine. And that's actually, if you ever hear me on my secondary setup, where I'm at the lodge, that's an AC404 I use for that.
Thanks, sir.
All right, do you want to take in this long one from Greg Gibson? This one's more of a discussion point, not a direct question, but let's go ahead and read it. It says, not so much a question, but maybe a discussion point. While I'm happy for Andy and Liminal and Zoom as well, I have to say that this development is bittersweet. I like having smart, independent third parties like Liminal out there finding tools within the SDK that are overlooked or discounted by corporate as serving too small of a market, but still valuable to those that need them. At the same time, I'm excited to see what happens now that Andy has access to the full suite of tools, as well as the ability to develop new tools for production. I just don't want to see third-party innovation get stifled.
Well, I a lot of confidence for sure in things like the Zoom Apps Fund, which are specifically targeted at encouraging third-party use of the Zoom platform and financially supporting that. Zoom's put a lot of money into things like that for sure. I can say on a personal note for this, yes, this is it's taking us out as a third party, but it's going to allow me to do things that I never would have been able to do at Liminal, for sure. Like there are so many that there's so much more story I want to tell with ZoomOSC and ZoomISO as concepts for the paradigm of interacting with the Zoom platform, that now I suddenly have at my disposal everything that I need to begin to build those blocks. Obviously, there'll still be limitations. There'll be new limitations and challenges, right? As Liminal, I had, certain free restrictions on the type of tools that I could use, right? Now I have a lot more tools at my disposal, but I have larger considerations to think about when it comes to how they're deployed. But what this does indicate is a serious thought process by Zoom about supporting a healthy ecosystem of third-party developers. The Zoom platform in the first place was how easy it was for me to go download the SDK and and bring something up in a couple of weeks that was the beginnings of what would become ZoomOSC. And it's only easier now than a year ago when I started working on this. So I think that, whether it's API level things where you're starting to see a broader range of offerings there, whether you're looking to do something white labeled with Zoom technology as the backbone, where the video SDK is coming in. If you're looking at client related experiences where the Zoom SDKs that we use to build Zoom are, with all the new capabilities we're getting, there's a lot of possibility there. Zoom apps, we're giving you the right inside of the Zoom client for everybody right there as another point of entry. The Zoom Room controllers have public APIs now. There's all sorts of ways that somebody can become involved in that, and so many different financial incentives. There's been a lot of, we haven't, I don't think, talked about it much, but there's been a lot of changes in the marketplace. It works as just an ecosystem for developers to be able to begin to take advantage of distribution and things like that. So I think Zoom was a leader in this already, and I think that they are pushing it even further now. So for myself, I'm excited about the opportunities I have internally, but I am also taking comfort in the idea that Zoom has a philosophy of openness around these third-party systems, and I'm seeing a lot of good signals that they're continuing to push that even further.
Well said. Well said. It's exciting. There's tons. I think what Greg really meant is we love you and we're going to miss you on the platform
and I love you guys too, but
that you used to be on.
Well, I would say this though, that the way I'm thinking about today is as a reintroduction to this community versus as a goodbye. I really am very serious about thinking about this as like, okay, now Liminal and Zoom, we're separate, had a relationship with you. Now we are sort of setting the ground rules for what that new relationship is looking like moving forward. But this is day one of that. And what I'm here to say today is that, and everybody process, including on the Zoom, are paying very careful attention to this group and the producers like this group to be voices now inside the organization to try to structure the being made to specifically attune to the workflows that are happening here. And while we started a lot of those things as a third party, as a first party, this bringing together of Zoom and Liminal is a statement in support of this community and all everywhere that we have people inside of Zoom whose day-to-day job make your life as good as possible as an event producer. I view that as sort of my personal mission on the product side. I know Jonathan feels similarly on a services. How can we push you guys as far forward as possible inside of the org versus banging on the door outside and saying, hey, we really need this. So in that sense, I feel that this is a sort of a reset point for us to say hi, this is day one together as a group, and not we're going off into the darkness to go do our own thing.
Great. Add to.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, let me give you a bit of an example, kind of what I'm talking about. And I told Andy a while back his superpower was his ability to create workflows for us because he really had a understanding of production, and two, it was nimble. He could take the tools and run with them, at least the things that he had access to. I think it's fair to say that everybody knows that I'm a big supporter of Zoom Room NDI. Would dare to say there's probably not a lot of people that have used it more than I have, and I find it to be a really great tool. But on the other hand, it's been out for 6 or 7 months now, and it took us 7 months to get the web controller updated to support NDI pinning. On the other hand, Andy, from the get-go, understood the importance of the companion workflows and finding those ways to simplify that. And as much as I love Zoom Room NDI, as I've used it, there have been times where ZoomISO was a better tool for me, simply because of what Andy was able to create that companion interface. And so I hope that, when I say, I don't want to see third-party innovation get stifled. I just hope that Zoom, I want to see us pick up the speed. And so when things like a need for to be updated to support the product. I hope it won't take 7 months to get that done. The next thing we need access to breakout rooms with NDI pins. And so I hope that's not going to be, I hope we're not looking at 6 months on that. So that's what I'm talking about.
Thanks, Greg. Guy, who's up next?
I think I will be. It's kind of a comment here. On office hours, I'd have to say your next acquisition as Zoom should be Mukana, because I'm struggling to get through these questions without all the upvotes to know what. And so upvotes in Q&A, downvotes.
But I'll go ahead and say that in all fairness, we have all of that. We don't have all of Mukana, but we have all of those things you just talked about in our Q&A within webinars.
In webinar, yeah. A little bit easier. And being able to have questions be a certain length, so that they don't go on for 500 characters, which AV Trainer, I'm sorry, I'm not going to read this other one that's like super long. So next one's coming in from Tlaloc Lopez Waterman, and he's kind of joking. Andy, if when you are on vacation, we'll hook you up. And then he says, but really, is theater making up at all?
I hope it's not a joke, because I want to take him up on it. So no, absolutely. Like, I mean, that is the art sort of the watering hole for me, where I go to recharge and come back to these problems. That'll be I think moving forward than less. I've had, I know I'm going to be super busy, but I want to keep being a sort of a doer and a practitioner of these things, so that I'm able to do my job better when it comes to understanding the needs and tools. But I absolutely want to be involved in projects externally related to the arts, and thinking about the paradigm shift of centralized production as it influences the aesthetic possibilities of how creators can express themselves. I came from this as a projection designer, right? And very carefully about digital media as a dual craft with computer science for me. And so this is going to be the arts will become more prevalent to me, I think, as I try to think about how we creatively express solutions through these platforms. It's one of the things I like about Zoom so much, is that it, even though it serves a very corporate market in a lot of senses, it feels very human to use. And I feel like there's something special about that. And I want to continue to sort of dive in and understand what that through theater productions and things like that, and community art and that sort of stuff, to understand better about how that into like specific solutions for big business and stuff like that.
I'm gonna get teed up there, Guy.
All right, we got one from Greg Gibson. He says, I believe I heard that audio and video is now available in SD. It will be incorporated into the existing ZoomISO product.
Yeah, so Brendan announced on Office Hours this week there was an SDK update that opened up a pathway to raw data inside of the client apps. And we've talked about before how important that would be to SDK applications like ZoomOSC and ZoomISO to be able to actually change the way that we interact with that. Now, I can't commit to any specific thing right now, but what I can say is that thing that I really needed for a really long time is there. So take with that what you will.
So I've been waiting a long time. Talon Jones, he says, have any of you here been able to get backstage going on Zoom webinar? If so, what program feed of the main room?
I wasn't sure. One of the things I'm really bad about is keeping up on what we've actually told the public. I have been working with product team on it. I've seen it for several months now. I've been seeing all in Figma, which we use to do our different UIs, and it looks really cool. And I can't honestly think of anything that I necessarily want there that wouldn't be a super heavy lift. Isn't around. Backstage obviously is not production. It's creating that green room, creating that space for presenters to be in. but it's got all the stuff I want and it works in the way I want it to. And I'm saying that as someone who's here with you guys doing this all day, every day. It's very exciting. It's going to be a really great feature.
I don't know what you can and can't. Can you send me an invitation and you know that I'm a speaker, therefore the link I click on takes me to backstage initially? Or is it a land and move, a lot more like a breakout room? Do you know?
I don't actually remember, or if I don't remember if that's if it's a land and move, or if it's a choice you make of where people end up. I can tell you from because this is just like the use case. I don't leaking anything here. From a production case, this produced panel thing of having like a meeting and then a webinar and having a switcher in between where I'm taking ZoomISO out of a Zoom meeting and then taking that switch and putting it over to a webinar. I can tell you right off the bat, the very first thing is having that meeting be the backstage, because I think that worked great. And then link together that chat and Q&A and the things that you were missing because you had people like double joining with a second laptop or an iPad or something to try to get to the native webinar Q&A, or having to backfeed it to them, and all of that starts to go away. Now that needs to be tested and practiced, and there's some gotchas and things we'll need to take into consideration. It's going to be yet one more thing where for the very immediate future, on that first release where it comes out, at least we're gonna be sitting there going like, oh dang it, now I'm back to Zoom Rooms because ZoomOSC can't join that way, so now I'm doing NDI instead of so, and, all the fun things that we've been doing for the past year. But incredibly excited about it. Go ahead, Greg.
Yeah, Sam, I didn't really understand what you're saying about having speakers in. I do this all the time. We put speakers in one meeting, we produce it. And we do that is because when we pull video out of a Zoom and push it back in, we can't pull the audio out and push that back in too, so we get audio syncing. Is why we do the two meetings to begin with. So would the with the backstage feature, I mean, have you guys given the issue? And then the other thing too is like one of the problems that we have, and Andy has built a solution for this in the past, and pushing a production into another meeting, is just being able to give the contributors access to the chat and the Q&A. Some way to bridge that back and forth.
And so like the audio delay issue, the idea of, okay, we're connected here. There's a computer connected to this that's pulling our video out, sending it into vMix, doing things to it, and then sending it up to YouTube. Then you're hearing my audio directly off my mic. You're hearing that video with one extra Zoom bounce down and back up. There's, other than just getting the latency down so far that it's negligible, there's no way to beat the physics on that. So we're not anything crazy there. That's the fact that, like, if you think of a breakout, instead of a webinar, let's think of it as a meeting with two breakouts, because I've also done this. We did some team meetings internally when we first merged pro events and online event consulting. We did our first couple team meetings with production to kind of show the event consultants, hey, this is what my team does. And the way we actually did it was we just popped a breakout inside they were all in. The brought it out to a switcher and then injected it back to the top level of the meeting. It's a separate audio video space. A breakout room, two breakout rooms within a meeting, in a lot of ways is functionally the same as just straight up two meetings. And so the webinar, functionally, as far as an AV standpoint goes, is two separate AV spaces. The audio and the video don't link between them, is the wording I'm going to say now. Don't on stuff conceptually, but those spaces are different. So there's no have your presenters talking backstage. That's where you gather their audio and their video. You do your production, and then you inject it over onto the actual side of the webinar. But backstage is going to give you some tools, and the difference between and breakouts or between it and a webinar is the fact that it's truly one webinar. So it's got access to some Q&A and the other stuff that they are missing. So that back channel is exactly where I biggest benefit, aside from there's also an inherent, and this is a small benefit, but an important one, which is that navigation of, I sent my speaker their link, I send out a panelist link and they click it. Well, when you ever start to do a produced panel and you're trying to tell these people about, like, here's the meeting link, this is what the presenters need to join, this is what the attendees need to join, and managing that, and people are so confused, and you have to explain so much technical to them that they don't care about, they don't need to care about. That takes all of start telling them, like, here's the link, use your link, it's great. Now that still needs to be tested. That will matter on exactly how the feature works. I'm really optimistic about it. But the other thing is the idea of, like, what can the liminal tools allow us to? Guess what? Liminal has access, ZoomOSC has access to chat. It can send and receive chat messages. So world's your oyster. What do you want to do? And this is what me and my team have been thinking is, actually, this is one of the first projects I'll probably throw Jonathan on, is just playing with, like, what sort of things do we want to do? Do we want to have it, like, do we want to just have it take the chat from that webinar and blast it into this meeting? Or maybe by doing that, but then give me an override so I can say, nope, the stage manager needs to take precedence, mute the audience chat so that it doesn't flood out my messages? Or do I want to take their chat and then let it go to a management dashboard built out of Isadora, where people are seeing all the chat messages and you choose which one to let go to my presenters and which ones do I not? And then maybe that appears in their chat, appears as part of the video return that I'm giving them. And it's part of a multi-view that they see program, they see what's on deck for preview, they see each other in the native gallery, and then they see that I told them next question, and a scrolling chat over on the right, like a Twitch streamer. Like, there's all sorts of possibilities for what truly is the best thing for this event, and creating an experience that we couldn't have created any other way.
Good stuff. I love the blend between the acquisition questions and functionality questions to keep it the kitchen, and so I appreciate that. I do want to do a time check. This is always advertised as a block. Seldom does it ever end at 2 hours, but I do want to do a time check respectfully to Sam and Andy and Jonathan, our guests, as well. You guys have some hard breaks that we need to pay attention to.
And not super hard, but I am probably aiming at a 2 hour mark.
Top of the hour, yeah. I understand as well. And it's an evening to celebrate. We're not here to take everybody away from that. Guy, what?
Another one in from Michael Peters, and he asks, will ZoomOSC be able to integrate audio with the future? What is the shelf life of ISO and OSC?
So we talked about the dynamic of, I think the question probably intends ZoomISO and audio, because OSC is mostly control focused. So we talked a little bit about that in a previous question. So I'll answer the second part about that, about the shelf life. And again, the message I'm coming here today with is that the workflows are part of the long-term strategy. So the applications themselves, I think the goal is integration and consolidation with the Zoom platform. But you look at the capabilities that they bring, and understand that, like, if you're building a solution on top of ZoomOSC right now or on top of ZoomISO right now, you're building on good bones. And the specific way that appears in the future to change. And again, that's because we're trying to enhance the capabilities, not take anything away, but because we bring things closer and closer together. But if you're building things on Stream Deck right now, you're building Isadora relations with the way that OSC is handled and input-output pairs and all of that, you're doing good things. Like, these aren't things that is a waste of time for you as a producer. This asset purchase from Zoom and the migration of our key personnel should be an indicator to you that these things are going to become more important, not less important. So these tools right now, and actually take this as an opportunity, because they're going to become more important in the future, right? They're going, like we were talking about earlier, that this is how you keep up with the game, is understanding, okay, what was Liminal doing? And now that these things are existing inside of Zoom, you're going to get a preview, I think, of what's to come by understanding how these workflows interact with each other and how they could benefit you in your production situation. So I'd say that this is a good time to be looking at this very carefully. And I wouldn't say that like if you're downloading, like it's too late for you to start to learn this stuff. No way. This is about the long-term strategy here.
Yeah, good stuff. Yeah, I don't know. From the small, simple meetings to the more complex events that have Zoom, either as the main component or a subcomponent of that. I don't know how people do it without it. Maybe not always ISO, but often ISO and so forth. But but to switch a meeting or a webinar by hand. I'd like to see more, ready with a tool set and skill set, and I've given it a pretty solid effort on folks know that if you don't have this as one of your toolkits, you're probably not going to get the jobs anymore, just because you're going to be sitting next to another technical moderator doing a kick butt job. You're doing one for the same company, just a different session, and you're not. And that's the difference is, the knowledge of ZoomOSC, and just makes all the difference in the world. Guy, who's up?
AV Trainer is up, and AV Trainer asks Sam, does this also mean better integration of Liminal's products into the UCC integration space, especially the small conference room installations and classroom spaces that much of Zoom hasn't been developing as much towards recently? And he says, thanks again for answering all of these questions.
So, candidly, I don't, especially the small UCC spaces, I don't see as much of a liminal workflow in there. Zoom Rooms and native is kind of my go-to within those smaller spaces. Now, within like, if I have like a production space for an all hands or something like that, yeah, if I started having staff and managing it, but Zoom Rooms as a software is entirely designed towards those and towards the ease of deployment, ease of operation, and the success. Of course, we've seen lots of, particularly in higher education, presentation spaces, like I talked about, video games, that sort of thing. There are really cool rooms out there where Zoom is a part of it. And that could be Zoom Rooms, that could be Zoom Desktop, that could be ZoomOSC and ZoomISO and production systems. But for the small, I have Zoom Rooms native is the way to go. Now, at the same time, I'm going to say I don't think it's accurate necessarily to say that we haven't been for Zoom Rooms as of recent. I will say it may have been a little bit slower than it had been as we've been focused on where the industry and everything was right now. But I think you'll see that Rooms is coming back with a vengeance. And I would encourage you to go look at virtual return to office tour, which is our we're actually expanding that out right now, but they do tours throughout the week, every week, that are open to the public. They have some that are open to the public, and that really just all the cool new Zoom Room features. I also, this a little earlier, but I'll drop in chat here. This is the blog post we just put out about like what happened this year, what to look forward to next year. And on there, almost half of the things are Zoom Rooms related. You're going to see stuff about smart voice commands, the way it pairs, Zoom Rooms for home, some of the whiteboarding stuff that's coming in the future. There's a lot happening in the Zoom Room space and a lot of excitement there. Now, I will say that especially like the thing you're going to see is you're going to see a lot of appliances. Zoom Rooms, and this change happened about 2 years ago, I think, that I really saw this. And like I said, like I was kind of like working my way out of a job as a DSP programmer at Zoom, or working my way into the niche spaces, into the really important key spaces. Day to day, the point of Zoom Rooms from its iteration was always about making that just stupid simple and stupid functional. It was making it work like the rest of Zoom works, like it just works. And that's really the focus, and appliances was a tremendous step towards that. Tripling down of that with our integrations and our partnerships with Neat, with D10, with Poly, with Logi. Trying to think if I'm leaving any names out and getting in trouble. But yeah, appliances is where it's at, and you'll see them all over the tour. There are some places where appliances are just really kicking butt. As far as like the simplicity of deployment, as we're looking at this, what does the hybrid return to office strategy look like? And it's not big rooms anymore. It's lots of small spaces and huddle spaces and hot desks, and the way we go about work, the way we set up our floor plans changed and is changing, and every business is still figuring out what that looks like. But just the same as events aren't returning to the same thing, the office is not returning to the same thing. We're not going back to 2019. Progress has happened. Progress continues to happen.
Yeah.
So does that mean that we're going to see some DMX in Zoom rooms? Come on.
I've already done DMX with Zoom rooms, for what it's worth.
From the controller?
Yeah, well, not natively. Zoomtopia 2019, if you went out on our expo floor and you went into any of the Zoom rooms, that was when we launched Zoom Rooms Control, which was one of my feature requests, actually. Zoom Rooms NDI was my feature request. Room Control was my feature request. Some of these others, Dante Native was my feature request. And actually the virtual receptionist was mine, oddly enough. But when you walk around the expo floor, if you went into any of the Zoom Room booths, we had buttons on the controller, on the Zoom Room controller, to turn the lights on and off. And the way that was actually working is it was controlling the MA backstage. So there was one Grand MA running all the expo lighting. Production company had brought in. And so there were, what were we doing? Actually, we were just doing it with IP control. It was just straight IP. I think a couple of them, they control some dumb strip lights and stuff, but that was just IP control going back to the Grand MA, which was then obviously going ArtNet to all the nodes.
Very cool. Let's take this one in from Ed Willock. Ed Willock says, will Zoom also as standalone products be developed for their features and upgrades just be integrated into future updates?
I definitely say that. I said before, I'll say again, I think we have a lot more exciting capabilities to bring to market. And I think that you'll see as we get into, as we actually start my job, get into things like that, that I'll actually have some time to strategize about how we want to present that specifically. But by no means are we done with the innovations that these things brought. And all the things I wanted to do, I still want to do. It's just a question of how we're going to do them. So all those things that I've been talking about, the different workflows we wanted to bring to the table, the way we wanted to enhance certain things about ZoomOSC and ZoomISO, I still want to do all those things. So it's just a question of how. So stay tuned for that.
And I think you answered this one. It says Andy mentioned on office hours the other day that the annual subscriptions of ZoomOSC are no longer available. What does that mean for current annual subscription customers?
Sure. So there's no annual subscription customer before March of 2020 or 2020. So the nobody will be in this situation for 3 years from now. But when we get to that point, the option to you is the monthly option. When you they're not going to auto renew at this point. You'll migrate to a monthly subscription at that point, but it won't be 3 or 4 months until we have to some guidance on how to do that.
All right, and one from AV Trainer. Can Zoom with Liminal give the level of not only visual controls, but integrated studio automation for these kinds of professional customers that normally have towards other kinds of products?
Well, I think that's part of what Sam was talking about too, with appliances being like go get this thing here, and then that is a very discrete way of integrating. Sam, I don't know if you have more thoughts on that.
It actually, if you look at it, it's a follow-up to a broadcast related question. So it's asking Skype TX Killer,
right?
Saying, and all I can tell you is that, like Andy said earlier, with reading between the lines on what you're seeing us do here, and watching all the people switching to Zoom in spite of it. I think the future is bright and we're focused.
I think that kind of falls. The question says there have been, this is by AV Trainer, and he says there have been a lot of broadcast related people that at these events. How do you see this transition being able to do more for traditional broadcast workflows or the broadcast industry in general?
Yeah, and that's where I think that's definitely a target demographic, something we want to really cover and cover well, since it doesn't matter if we release any features for it, you're already using us for it. So now we want to release the features and make it better. So that's something we're looking at.
So was it my imagination, or did the codec quality improve recently in the last like 6 months? Did we actually see a better bit depth of color or anything like that?
I don't know of anything specifically, no.
No. So is that on the future roadmap then, if it's going to be a Skype killer, Skype TX killer?
I don't have an educated answer.
HDR. Yeah, I think that's where we'd love to just see, a higher bit rate, just because some of the things that we're seeing is just not the fidelity. It's like having the crayon box that's 16 colors as opposed to there's a little bit more when you watch these same videos on YouTube. You just see how sparkly they are, and they look so robust and beautiful. So one day, I guess that's the wish. Let's see, was there any other questions? I know that we're running up against top of the hour. Is there any others that I skipped that anybody wants to jump in with?
No, I see the one just about the fact that I've come out and done a bunch of different sessions like this and made myself and my team relatively available, and asking if Andy's going to be doing similar things to this. And while I'll let Andy answer for himself, what I do want to highlight is that I totally intend on getting Jonathan out for stuff like this, and both as a paid service offering, but also just like I've said, we have a teach a man to fish mentality. We're definitely out there to promote success with Zoom and with events again. So from my org.
From my side of the coin, it's a priority for me, because I think that's what makes this event. That's what, like, if we are insulated from the community that we're trying to serve, we're doing everything with one hand tied behind our back, probably a leg too, honestly. So it's a priority for me to be able to continue to engage. It'll be engaging in a different way for sure, but the sort of the release this feature, or we're about to release this feature, what do you think, how's it going, like those kind of things that I did through Liminal were crucial. So it's an important request for me to be able to continue to be able to do that and engage with guys and give training when needed, but also be trained by the community about what's working, what's not working.
Good stuff. I think
two real fast ones I can answer. AV Liminal's non-conferencing production product. I think it's safe to say that all the consulting agreements in place are all being sorted or have been sorted. And like I said, from the services side, as long as Zoom needs to be somewhere in there for us to be kind of involved with it, but our point is from event services to really expand beyond. We're not just here to talk the Zoom portion. We're here to talk, we're here to talk the entire stack of what's making that production happen. And then the other one from Ed Willock, ultimately asking about HD. And my answer to that is the same that I've said before, but we're talking about 720. 720 1080 gets a little different. But when we're talking about 720 HD, everyone can have it. Just ask support for it. It's yours. Pro account, you can get 720, no problem. You don't need to do tricks. You don't need Zoom rooms. You don't need any of these things. You just need to message support and get them to turn it on. And I would encourage everyone here to please do that, because I don't want to see it in 360 as much as you don't want to see it in 360. I don't want any more events in 360. No more.
Does that, Sam, does that recommendation that, hey, you can get, does that to the attendee in the webinar? Will
It
they
all
give
has
us
to.
that?
It all has to do with the host accounts. So, but it does. If you have a license, not business, you can contact support and say, I need HD on my webinars for my attendees, and they will turn it on. No other prereqs. Again, 1080 steps a little past that. There's some things, if you're on a business or higher, you can get 1080. Realistically, 1080 versus 720, like, you know, Guy talked about the bit depth and the codec rates. I've seen some really great looking 720 on Zoom. Like, I think at this point we've stepped all of our ZoomISO rigs down to 720 because we're getting better performance there. And I've frankly seen some situations where, like, I've seen some instances where my bit rate actually didn't change between the two of them. So like the number of pixels versus how it's encoding it shifts. Get yourself to 720. It'll look nice, and then you're where you are.
Very good. Rupert?
I just was trying to get my hand up on the earlier talking about the Stream Decks and how that Stream Deck functionality might be useful to wider audiences. I think that's true. I think there's all kinds of use cases out there for tighter Zoom surface, control surface integration. One of the ones that Zoom currently recommends, I guess, or lists, is this thing called the Zap Pad. I would consider this less than ideal. Integrate this, alternative. This is like actually just a wireless relabeled thing. But if a Stream Deck, OSC solution was the Zoom recommended solution instead of less than ideal, I think that would be a good use case.
I remember when those came out, and it was really interesting to me because I went through like all these different stages internally with bargaining with myself of like, oh man, this is really cool and it's so this is awesome, but I kind of wish it was hardwired in Bluetooth, and I kind of wish it like had a hardwired option instead of the battery. But it's really cool. I really wish I could relabel the buttons. Like if they each had a screen on them, that'd be awesome. I sat there for a second, I was like, okay, so I literally just built a Stream Deck, and then I bargained with myself that I'd be willing to pay more. I was willing to pay the price of a Stream Deck for a Stream Deck.
Right.
And then the difference is really about the configuration. And on those, like there is no configuration. You power it on and it's there.
Yeah, this is just a remapped number keypad. Like this is all this. If you don't have Zoom open and you type this in, you'll get the keystrokes out through, into Notepad or whatever. Yeah.
But at the same time, the beauty of it is that simplicity, is that anyone can take it. They set it there, they do it. It's not even the 3-minute video it would take, or the 5-minute video that Andy could show you of here's how you could use ZoomOSC and load this companion file and you're done. It's so much simpler than that. And as soon as you start, like it's not that much friction, but for some people it's a lot of friction. So I think you can look forward to us continuing to
and that last point that Sam made about like the pick up and go time for ZoomOSC is also a front of mind thing for me. That'd be a really important push for us about making sure that like even shipping with ZoomOSC, like the companion presets and all that stuff, so like you were ready to go beyond just grabbing the app. Like I totally agree that what we need with these integrations is not just like the open platform, here you can come and build your thing, but also like 99% of you want this exact thing that we're handing you. And when you plug in your Stream Deck, those are, that's, I think, really more ideal than like, an infinitely configurable Stream Deck and like a numpad with some stickers on it, right? Like it's I think we can get there. It's just a question of like, what does that look like? How do we do that securely? Like, what are all the steps that are involved in that? But I can imagine that being a really, really killer thing.
Good stuff. What Guy? I know we're getting through most of it, but we've got a couple newer ones.
Which ones? I think we got to the last of them. Or actually, how about this Ed Willock one? Yeah, we got that one. I think we're good.
Yeah. All right. Very good. Well, timing's good. Right at the top of the hour. I've got another 8 hours, as you can see on my clock. I'm Central Time, U.S., and we're counting down the time. And this is the last night my sons are home. Leave tomorrow to drive back to Utah for college. So it should be an exciting night. I want to thank Sam again for, I don't know how many times you've been here now, 3 or 4 times at least. But and Andy, Jonathan, congratulations to all of you. And it just keeps, it keeps getting better. I can feel a little bit. I know others feel a little bit. Those that have invested. I hope you sense that, and I think your response are super helpful in the sense of kind of calming some nerves and in the future. The worst thing that could have happened is that all of a sudden you speak an entirely different language because you're wearing a different badge, and we understand. I think most of us understand that there's certainly going to be a door to be spoken through and another one that can't be, just for the intellectual property. But really appreciate your candor and explanations, and we look forward to having you back in the future as well, just for updates here and there. And if there's anything that we as a community can do to help you continue to develop, or if you need something workshopped, Zoom Test Kitchen is a hands-on for sure, right? And so need to workshop things, just ping us, and we'll be happy to help, and with the commitment of some really solid feedback too. So
absolutely.
anyways,
And thank you as always for maintaining that. And as I said before, this is like meeting for the first time now. Like, this is the beginning of what will be the next phase of our relationship together, that we were able to, like you say, address any of those concerns. God, is the app going to disappear? Is all this work wasted? Is all this money wasted? And say, like, no, actually, this is the start of, and it's not the end of the story by any means. So I'm glad. I appreciate the opportunity to sit with our users and discuss that together, and also to say that, like, this is the beginning of where we're going to go together. This is a really exciting time to be in the sector that we're in, and that we're listening, we're here, and we're really excited to work together.
Yeah, fantastic. Any closing words, Sam, Jonathan?
I think Andy said, yeah, here's to a good 2022 for virtual events.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, everybody, for coming out every Friday afternoon at 3:00 Eastern, and we will continue to do that. We commonly, it's not a panel discussion, but with this week's news and so forth that finally got out to the world, I thought the timeliness was right. But commonly, it's a workshop. It's not a come listen to Jeff's presentation. It's a workshop. Specific issues, successes. If we need to for a few minutes, try that out and drive it yourself, we'll do that. I mean, it's a really, really solid experience, I think, that's brought a lot of value to the industry as well. So appreciate you all coming out. Spread the word. Happy New Year's to everybody. Let's reflect back on all the good things that have happened in a challenging year, but I've been told for many years, count, and so it will keep us going and have a strong 2020. All right, everybody. Happy New Year.